You guys look at Sue, the halo around her head. She's in the spotlight. Yeah, in the morning when you sit on this side, and in the evening you're right in there. It gets you right through there. It's the right angle. Thanks. Yeah, I've been noticing when we play videos in here, a lot of times you can't see them very well. Those of us up here, we're looking right there. It looks great. And this morning, seeing the slide up there, it was kind of dim. So I had Ethan to turn the lights down a little bit, so the romantic kind of setting here as we talk about marriage. Up a little bit. Yeah, I think it's, there you go. How many of you were impacted by the Verizon outage on Monday? Verizon was totally out of service for some people Monday. Just Carl and I?
I'm the only one that has Verizon.
Oh, maybe.
We used to have Verizon, but we got Spectrum.
Yeah, it seemed to be primarily within a plan, but not in every case. And cell phone, yeah. No service at all for quite a few hours on Monday. Yeah.
Is that going to be this Monday? Or is it already been?
No, it was this past Monday. Yeah, I found out from Verizon, just not because I went there to figure that out, it was another reason, that it was all because of the hurricane impacts down in the Carolinas, the surgence of power there to meet people's needs. It impacted people elsewhere. Yeah. All right, let's go to God in prayer. Father, we thank you for this beautiful fall morning, the Christmas in the air. We see harvest all around us. The pumpkins are shining bright as the sun glistens upon them, and the fall flowers are in bloom. And God, we just continually are mesmerized by the beauty of your creation. But God, also help us not just marvel in that, but to honor and praise you, because we certainly recognize the presence of the Creator. God, we ask you to be with us this morning as we reflect upon our relationship with you and our relationship with our spouse. And God, just as we think about our relationships with others within the Christian family and those that we come in contact, that we are a light for you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, this morning we're going to kind of pick up where we had left off. Last week we were looking at some statistics, including about divorce, and when you look at some of those, certainly there's a lower divorce rate among church than unchurched, but it's not the magnitude that we might, kind of first think. And so from some of those statistics, then we moved on to, let me see, you got to turn it on. To look at this from the aspect of our relationships and who we are as a Christian family, that we have a common faith, but we have some different life experiences, different challenges, and that's important for us to realize as we look at our own life, but also how we reach other people. And when you think about those that are married, some with kids, without kids, individuals not married but cohabitating, singles, we have children coming in here without their parents. And so when we begin to find the nuclear family, there would be the definition that we probably come up with, there would be several who would consider themselves not relating to the nuclear family. And so what are we doing as Christians to help them to feel a part of this Christian family that we assemble here as, and that we live our lives as, and ministry as we look up here on the board. We're imperfect also, but we serve a perfect God, and it's His perfecting love that brings us in unity, certainly with Him, and then with each other. But some may not feel very loved because they don't feel like that they don't meet the stereotypes. That when we come in this building and sit down, that we meet the stereotype of most everybody that's sitting here. But I would dare to say, many cases, do we know each other? Do we know each other's past? Do we know what each other's going through now? And if we do, how are we helping each other? That's part of the message that I want to come out of this, in that we all have challenges in life to face, and some of those are in our marriage, some of them are in other aspects of life, and so what are we doing to meet the needs of this family? And as we've already spent some weeks looking at how much God emphasizes that the church and the is a family, and He relates the relationship between a man and a woman to Christ and the church, and how often in the parables that the marriage is used as an example to relate a message that certainly the people at that time, and still just as of today as well, of how they're to be in relationship not just with each other, but with Him. And so we had not really got down to this last point, but everything above that last point is, this is us. We're not exactly a homogeneous group. We're everybody of a similar background. Even when we became a Christian, relative into our marriage, not everybody is a Christian before they become married. Some are Christians later, and some have experienced challenges with relationships, and maybe divorced, maybe remarried, children not faithful, other challenges with children. We all have different things, each one of us, and a different perspective. And so that's this is us. And how are we using our faith and our relationship with God to give us direction versus our own wills and so forth. So turn to John chapter 8. That point there, I know there's a little bit of echo. Sorry about that. How do we minister to the disenfranchised? And, it's important to think about those who feel as they are disenfranchised because they don't meet the stereotype. Is it real or is it perceived? Doesn't matter. Based on what our duty as a Christian is. Even if they perceive that they're disenfranchised, I don't have anybody to connect with. Right here, those who come in those doors, I don't have anybody to connect with. They may not really, because we haven't reached out, although I think this congregation does a really wonderful job of that. And sometimes it might just be perceived. But why is that perception there? Is it when they step in that they think that, well, we're all perfect, and so they can't share their flaws? Or is it the way we present ourselves to them? And so it's all that we have to evaluate is the thoughts and feelings they have potentially very real, or are they perceived? But nonetheless, our call to action is the same, right? That we need to be of assistance to them in whatever state that they come to us in. So John chapter 8 is, I think, an opportunity for us to reflect a little bit on sometimes how we may react to a situation. And we know this text pretty well, but sometimes we have to put ourselves into a situation to say, well, which way did I react? Maybe it's when you find out something about an individual, a couple, and what's your first reaction to that? So John chapter 8, verse 1 through 11. But Jesus went out to the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming in to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. So a very opportune time, he had their attention. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the midst. So he sat down to teach them. Of course, I think he knew what was about to happen, but nonetheless, they did not come into his presence necessarily to learn. They came into his presence to make a point and see if he was going to honor the law. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought this woman in verse 4, and they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery and in the very act. Now, the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?" And they were saying this, testing him, in order that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. And when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up. And he said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone. And the woman where she was in his midst. So they were left alone, the others that been the accusers had left. So Jesus straightened up and he said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on sin no more." So we look at the story and we think, oh, how dare the accusers? Because obviously they weren't perfect. Otherwise, they would have remained there and continued to plead their case. Jesus is going to do what's the right thing to do based on the law. So they had issues in their life to address that they were unwilling to deal with. And they left his presence. And Jesus then acted upon that. He didn't say that what you had done in the past was right. He said to her, "Neither do I condemn you," but his last statement is, "Go and sin no more." Because he was trying to set her on that path of where life was going to be focused on him, because if she left and sinned no more, then she was going to be honoring him. Yeah, he had the power to forgive, but we also have the liberty to forgive. And so when often we are dealing with situations and people are sharing with us, we want to have the stone in our hand. And you know, as I look at in this audience, we're a fairly diverse group in many kind of respects, but Christ has brought us together as one. And so when we get ready to throw the stone, and then if we stop before we throw the stone and think about our own life and our own weaknesses, what's the likelihood the hand is going to lose its grip on the stone? And realize that we need to think about what's going on in our lives, and then how can I help this individual, this couple, whatever, to get closer to God. Because if I'm going to try to get closer to God, then that's what I should be helping them do rather than throwing the stone. Because in that relationship then, you can help them draw closer to Christ, to what the central message of maybe the issues really are, rather than throwing the stone and seeing how hard they fall. Yes? Yeah, when he said, "Go and sin no more," that was implying that her life had not been where it should have been, but he was admonishing her to go forward with a different way about life now. And that's what the same thing can happen with us as we realize what we need to work on in our life. We'll be more effective in communicating with others of why it's so important for that relationship to make your life better. Because then there will be less desire for those other things that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. What are all those other things? And adultery here relative to sex outside of marriage certainly is one of those. But there's many other things as well. And those things are going to be difficult to separate out of our life if we're not drawing closer to Christ. And the same will be the case for the individuals that we interact with. But good point. Yeah. So the issue that to just keep us reminded about is whoever we come in contact with, or coming inside those doors or we meet them, our goal is to draw them closer to Christ. And in that, their relationship with Him, if it hasn't started, begins. They accept Him in baptism, and that they continue to grow in that faith. That should be our goal. And when we think at it from that point of view, it changes our approach. So much so that we're not ready to throw the stone as to share the word. Thoughts? Roger.
I always have this thought about bending over and writing in the dirt. I think maybe the first time he was writing in the dirt, it was something to the effect of the Ten Commandments. And then they started accusing the lady again after he did that.
Still the law.
Yeah, he wrote the law, and then they started leaving one by one. I don't know that he wrote, Mark, you did this, and called them out one by one, but I think he called them out something like, some of you in this audience have done this.
Yeah, it's kind of like when he said, one of you is going to betray me, and then they all begin to question, is it I? Is it I? So if that question is raised among us here this morning, and relative to how we're going to relate to a situation, or if there's an accusation that somebody in this audience is sinning with this, would we be confident to say, it's not me? Doesn't mean I don't have other faults, but it's not that one.
And he didn't condemn them either. He kind of let them condemn
Themselves. Yeah, in this case. Now, other times, he didn't wait for them to, he shared very outrightly, woe to you Pharisees, because.
That's the first time I've noticed it, but where did the crowd of people go to? Because they were there before the Pharisees and scribes brought her, but then at the end, he was left alone with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, did they leave when the Pharisees and scribes brought this family? Did they not want to be a part of it and they're embarrassed by it? Or, when? I've just never really thought that until we just went through it.
Yeah, as I was reading through that, it occurred to me, where is everybody else? Because they were coming to Jesus for him teaching. I think that's in the sequel, the second movie. No, I'm not sure. Yeah, if they had kind of separated themselves because they wanted other people to take their position, so I don't know that maybe Jesus kind of drew them away to be an isolated group, but I don't think the scribes and Pharisees wanted to necessarily, they wanted more followers too, so I don't know where they are.
We don't really have the length of time, but I think it's easy to get caught up in emotion, and it's more difficult to sustain. So it's just so easy to get mad.
Yeah.
The longer I take a deep breath, or reply to that email, whatever mean thing came across.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Just take a breath.
Yeah, and that's where, as we interact with each other, or we learn something about someone, we want to react. And about a week, it's 3 weeks or so more ago now, I got an email from an individual, business related, and they weren't very happy with a decision made, and it's kind of like Daniel, you're saying, I really wanted to just fire right back because I had all my responses right here. They just need to be an email, but it wasn't a good time. And so I waited a week and put it in email. But that's kind of the thing that we need to always take a step back, and because a lot of times our reaction is based on our prior experiences, our emotional state at the time. We need to separate ourselves, and I know it's a cliche, what would Jesus do? But what is it that I should do in a constructive manner in this conversation, whether it's face-to-face or by email? And that's why we always say, even when you're dealing with your kids, take a deep breath, before you react, because then you got more oxygen flow into your brain, and hopefully it'll be handled a little bit maybe different than it would have. So you're right, and I think that's a lot of times when we begin ready to throw the stone, it's emotional reaction. Like Joe mentioned to us a week or two ago about a situation where I think it was a minister's spouse, is that right, Joe, that left and married a female. And so, when you hear those kind of things, your emotion is, but our goal always should be to draw individuals closer in that relationship with Christ. Good point. All right, so we're going to move from there to focus a little bit more on marriage, and I pulled just various topics together and put them into that word collage, and so you'll see a lot of words on there, and it's not an all-inclusive list by no means. You might say, wow, there's a lot of words. Well, this particular program just continued to repeat them until it filled up the page. But, as you look at these things of respect for each other, love, intimacy, appreciation, his needs, her needs, your nurturing, all those things we'd say yes, but we all may struggle with those at different times. But then we always need to come back in terms of where is God? And so I put God in this, and there's God. And but you probably didn't see that first. And so each one of us should be asking ourselves, in terms of my relationship with my spouse or even with other people, where is my relationship with God? Because then that's going to set the tone for what our relationship is in marriage and otherwise. And God is here. He's in front of the marriage. He's in the back of the marriage. He's all around. And really, God should be first, and then our spouse. And so often we push God away, not because God walked away, and then we're handling this situation ourselves. And we're going to get into this in a few minutes if we have time today. This aspect that we want control. Because when we begin to want to be in control, that's when things begin to be a problem. So I wanted to share with you some thoughts here. You remember probably a couple of weeks ago we had this life timeline. Different things in life happen. And so within marriages, there's a timeline as well. And I thought this was a really good resource to kind of shed some light on that. Marriage is an incredible journey of love and growth and change throughout that. Because, you think about that, as we go through marriage, we are going through life, and there's things changing about us. They're changing in terms of what some of our priorities are. We're changing relative to how we feel about lots of things in life. Even the hot topics of politics and everything. We change the way we go. But how is it then we are bringing our spouse and our relationship with them along as we change in life? And so this particular resource, whether there's 9 or not, there's 9 steps in this, but whether there's 9, 6, or whatever is not that important, as the marriage has a lifeline through of changes, and the relationship Whether it's a first marriage, second marriage, whatever it is, there's going to be that. There's some disclaimers that these authors offered, which I thought are really important, and we have to accept as we are trying to support each other, we're not all the same. And not every marriage is exactly the same. It's just not going to be. And so we try to put it in a little box that every marriage, is going to be like this, then that can become difficult. And so we have to accept that. There sometimes can be missing the point if you're fixating on, well, which stage are we in? Are we in 7 or 9? That's not so important as identifying, are we at a good stage or we're really struggling? And if we're struggling, what are the roots of this struggle? And then the last one some of these stages could be positive. Doesn't mean they're all negative. It just means that it's a stage. So the first one these authors point out, and if you want to know this website, I'll share it with you. And there's some interesting things. I think that they have a marriage test. So if you want to do a marriage test, what I think can bring up some interesting things for discussion. And then they have different links to each area within these 9 if you want more information. So the first one to bring in is certainly the honeymoon moments. That's no surprise, right? But I'm older school, and so a little more gray hair, and what the honeymoon used to be is like, I find couples now they're going on their honeymoon a year later. Oh, okay. So we talked about that the first week of class, and there's differences today in how weddings occur and how they celebrate and so forth. But regardless, you understand what the moment is. The honeymoon is when you're really trying to figure each other out. The intimacy is there in sexually and as well as other aspects of really trying to get to know each other. And even when there are some challenges sometimes, they're just overlooked because it'll be fine. It's still all new. And so the honeymoon phase is there, and it can be a different length of time for one couple versus another. Then there's the awakening realization stage following that, to where the rose-tinted glasses come off, and it's like, well, I'm not so happy that you do this or do that, and you finally get the words out. Before you thought them, but you didn't say them. Now they're spoken, and whichever spouse has spoken to, it's like, whoa, why hadn't you told me that before? And you might say, well, it's just toothpaste. Well, it might be something bigger than toothpaste that comes out, and they're like, I thought everything was fine, and so that begins the conflict a little bit. But it's through that then you learn how to work through conflict, because there's going to be conflict. Now, conflicts comes in all different magnitudes of challenges. Is it really toothpaste, or is it I want to change jobs, or I want to buy a new car? Is it financial? Is it how we raise kids? Whatever it is, that's bigger than the toilet paper, the way it's on the roll, or whether you squeeze in the middle or the end of the toothpaste. And we joke about that sometimes, but it's just life, That happens still. Donna and I have been married. I have to do the math. I shouldn't bring it up. I can't remember the math. What is it? We got married in 1979, so you do the math. 45? Yeah, 45 years. And so sometimes still, and it's, now we forget things. It's like, so when did you start doing that? Well, I don't know. Why did I start doing that? I can't tell you. I forget. And so, it's early on, it's like, well, this is not the right way to do it. Now it's like, well, we just forget, And so we have to accept now, as we are older, that why some things are different just because we forget and not let it bother us, you know. It just embrace it that we're forgetting things now. But that particular stage for younger couples is a bit of where the conflict a lot of times begins. Now, the third one, the resurgence, 5 to 7 years of marriage is sometimes indicated. Intense change and growth, wanting to change them, wishing things were different. It's like, okay, we've argued over this for quite a while, and I thought you were going to change. I never said I was going to change. Yeah, I heard you say that you didn't like that, but it didn't mean I was going to change. And so we become fixated on changing the other one rather than they're the same people that we married. And they were doing it when we got married, but now it's like a big deal? Why is it a big deal now? So sometimes the problem is us. Now, so I highlight this in yellow as well because what else happens around this stage of marriage? Children. A lot of times this is when children are born. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a whole other layer of working together, right? And so children are brought into this complexity because we haven't had to deal with a lot of those things. It was just you and I. And now children into this, and oh, the list is long in terms of, you know, well, we started now. How many do you want? You know, or this is how we're going to raise the kids, even food or, you know the list. So children come into this about this time. Then we examine our reflections. We reflect on life and priorities. So part of the layer into this is we've gotten older now. So we suddenly realize, okay, if I continue on this path, am I going to stay in the same job? Maybe I'm ready for a career change. I finally got enough money, it's time to buy that sports car. I don't know. And so we got along to this point and where I'm beginning to look at, there's the other end of life, and what do I want to yet achieve? And how am I bringing my spouse along with that? Or am I selfishly just thinking about, this is me? Roger.
I don't get this one very well myself. You know, the first thing I see up there that should be up there, there's no prayer. Prayer for your spouse.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing is, that I'm just trying to share with you different stages, but prayer should have began before you got married. Praying for each other, and then praying continually then within the marriage. And praying together, not just you praying for them and they praying for you, it's praying together. And so we touched on that in terms of that's part of that relationship with God. And if we put Him number one, then God is part of every stage as we interact and work on these things with our spouse. No point in this stage should we be setting God aside and think that we've got it in control ourselves. Joe?
You need to learn to forgive.
Yeah.
It's a big part. I learned that at 64 years.
Yeah. I mean, your need for forgiveness. Just checking. Yeah, it goes both ways. We need to forgive, but also we need to share, we need your forgiveness. Because it's a dual match. And you're exactly right. And that's one of the things I have mentioned here in a few minutes that really become challenges in each one of these stages is if we're unwilling to forgive. And it could be a very monumental issue that occurred to very simple things that just become annoyances that we focus on rather than the big matter. Fifth one, intentional adjustments, time to align actions with growths. That, if you're going to prepare for this long-time journey, I can't just dream about it. I got to put things into action. Well, again, have you brought your spouse along with this, and are you in union and going this direction? Because if you're about to take action and you haven't, you're making a right turn and they're still going this way. And so you got to be bringing them along. Affectionate recommitment. You've weathered a lot of storms by this time. You've been through a lot of things together. Raised kids, maybe. Could be death of grandparents. Maybe a change in job. Financial standing may have changed some bit, hopefully for the better. But you've weathered a lot of things together, and have these life events brought you closer in your relationship with God because you relied on Him, and closer to each other, or has it driven you further apart? And sometimes I think this is where divorce comes into play, is we haven't kept God in there. We haven't worked on the things together. And it's like, I've got life out here, and it's time to be happy. If I'm not happy, then here's how I become happy. We get all into that false sense of direction. Now the next one, genuine growth pains, intimates and romance rekindled, that we went through kids and maybe even getting them off to college, and well, just mom and dad at home now. The empty nest syndrome. And you have to re-find each other because you found each other in a car between soccer games and this and that and life, and now there's silence. You're sitting across the table from each other. Now what? So you need to redefine and rekindle and draw closer to each other when you have more time now than you had together before. And so that's why that's highlighted again. Now the kids probably are leaving, and that brings on challenges. Also, during all of these events, then you keep in mind of life changes. Maybe health issues have occurred at this particular point in time. Maybe parents have died. I mean, your parents, or they're in later stages of life, and now you're caring for your parents. And how does that impact the relationship with your spouse? So another major change. And then during the stability phase, this gets very important. The older you get, security. I mean, that's always an important thing in the marriage relationship. Safety and security. But as you get older, you try to plan for some of that relative to insurance and retirement and yada, yada, yada. And then the couple is needing to support each other in that as well, in those golden years. As we move into that last one, to focus on companionship and emotional support in those latter stages of life. So, you can kind of think about maybe where your marriage is along this journey. And what I would encourage you this week to do is think about your marriage, for those who are married, and that lifeline within your marriage. And talk to your spouse about it. That, how long you've been married, okay, that's the start. When if you need some help, we'll come in with your anniversary date. Donna has it in the office. And so you take your anniversary date and move forward. And it doesn't matter if you think about each one of these stages, but what has your stages been, and how have you worked on those things together? What is your relationship with God through that, and what is it now? Because I think as you focus on that and what's got you to this point, hopefully you can learn from that and draw closer to God as you move to the next whatever phase that is. And so I'd encourage you to think about that this week.
I just read somewhere this week that sometimes we make decisions because the grass seems to be greener on the other side.
Yep.
Come to find out the grass was greener because it was above a septic tank.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I'll leave that where it is, Joe. Yeah. So I think some things to think about as you look at your marriage lifeline through those stages is, don't just focus on the negatives or the challenges there, but on the joys and how to lift each other up in the stages, I mean, you have in the stages that you've been in, but looking forward, how you can lift each other up. You know, what this is so true about life. We get so boiled down and drudgery of the dealing with things. Sometimes we forget to enjoy the moment. And every day, that's the way life should be. Enjoy the moment. What is it? Where is my relationship with God? Am I emulating Him? What positive impact am I having on people today? What positive impact am I having on my spouse today? Enjoy that moment, because you put those together, then you'll see that life has been a wonderful journey. Because it is about the journey. There are landmines, and Joe, you brought up one of those, that if we in that relationship are unwilling to forgive, then that's a problem. If we become very selfish, that it's going to be my way or no way. And then another one there is neglect. If we put our focus on other things than what they should be, and sometimes they're very innocent type things relative to life. Sometimes it's our job, and you know, we all probably struggle with that at some point. And so even, you know, Don's had to remind me at times about that, and time availability, whether it's to the kids or to our relationship. And so neglect is important. And sometimes we tilt and we got to be brought back here. We may tilt again and we got to be brought back here. But that is an important one. And then growing in that faith. So I know it's 10:18. Not where I wanted to wrap up, but we'll wrap up here. Next week we will look at several scriptures on relating to how so often we want to be in control. Dare to be in control. That I got this. And whether it's dealing with all the distractions in life, and I think there's certainly some biblical things there that we can see that, wow, yeah, they were distracted from their eyes on Christ. Sometimes it's all about me, you know, and when I begin to think all about me, I'm not thinking about my relationship with God, and I'm not thinking about my relationship with my spouse. We do make excuses, and sometimes we try to reap where we really haven't sown. And so those are some of the things that we'll be looking at several Bible verses with next week. All right, have a good week.